This is the Gen Y Leaders Podcast. Welcome to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast, where we guide millennials to become the next generation of business leaders and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Eric Huey, and multiple times a month, we bring you interviews from high-performing millennials who are challenging perceptions and changing expectations of our generation. Our mission is to help you overcome fear, take action, and go confidently in the direction of your dreams. It's time to start preparing now, mainly because 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day, which will create a vacuum of career opportunities that you've been waiting for. Will you be ready?
Thibaud. I'm the founder, co-founder, and CEO of Loomly. Basically, we are a collaborative platform for marketing teams. So you can think of us as the GitHub, but for marketing teams, or the InVision, but for marketing teams. Mm-hmm. And this is a company I created back in 2016. Because of a need that I had in a previous company that I had, which was an advertising agency, and we had that process with our clients that needed some optimization, and so we kind of built the tool that we needed to address that workflow, and that eventually turned into its own company, which has become Loomly.
Yeah, I'm just trying to set up more for listeners. So some of your other competitors, would they be like Asana or Basecamp or Monday, or anything like that? Or am I not thinking correctly?
Well, it's interesting what you said, because in a way, we actually offer a lot of collaborative features that actually help marketing teams work together. Mm-hmm. And so usually we tend to be compared more to tools like Hootsuite and Buffer and Sprout Social that allow you to publish content to social media, for instance. But the truth of the matter is we are actually like a hybrid of the companies that you just mentioned and the companies that I just mentioned, because we kind of package into one platform the collaborative aspect of marketing with features that are really targeted to these specific marketing workflows, with some scheduling capabilities like the tools that I mentioned. So it's actually a very interesting comparison.
Yeah, very cool. That's your unique value proposition, that's for sure.
Yeah, in a way, yes.
Best of both worlds.
Exactly, yes.
So talk more about identifying this need when you had your advertising agency, and how Loomly really came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, one of the things that is very important is that I've been working with my spouse Noémie for over 8 years now, and Loomly is the fourth company that we're building together. And so prior to building Loomly, we actually had a marketing agency or an advertising agency operating both in France and here in the US. In France, we were more working with larger companies. Our biggest client was L'Oreal, the cosmetic company.
And here in the US, that's a big one. Congrats.
Yeah, it's a big one, and we were managing 5 brands for them online. So it was a pretty big contract for us.
Yeah.
And so here in the US, we were mainly working with startup companies, and there was something interesting, which is that there was a common process to all of those clients, regardless of the size, the type of company, or even the location, which is that we had to produce and manage for them what we call editorial calendars, mm-hmm. or editorial plannings. And you can just think of these plannings as basically a spreadsheet with a list of the content that you're going to publish on Facebook and on blogs and on in the media if you do some PR. And the thing is, as you may understand, Excel was not meant for that. Yeah. So it was kind of challenging to always, collaborate through Excel. And it was just, very repetitive, time consuming, and error prone. And so we decided that, there had to be a better way. And so, we looked online if we could find something that would help. And of course, there were all those schedulers that I mentioned that we actually were using to actually publish content ahead of time. But the thing is, none of them was actually helping us with that part of the workflow, which is how do we find ideas? How do we actually, manage our assets, draft the copy of the post, and how do we assemble everything in a way that will, make sense for our clients or our team members so that they can review and approve everything before we actually end up publishing the content. And so that's basically, how the idea came up. The very first version of the product was very, very basic, and it was just, there was no API connection whatsoever. It was basically just an application that would allow you to stage content, get it approved by your team, and then that was it. And so, as the company grew, then we added asset management features, and we added scheduling capabilities and analytics, and basically everything that you need to manage the entire content publishing workflow.
Your story was that you took this, what I guess would call a 1-year kind of sabbatical or vacation, time off from work before you really dove in full time to your career. I guess put me on track if I'm wrong at all with that. And if I am tracking well, tell the listeners a little bit about that, maybe why you did it, and get us started there.
Yeah. So, since our conversation, I thought a lot about, how I could explain it. And actually I thought that, this idea was rooted much further down my past or up my past, I don't know, than I thought. And here's the thing. So, I'm from France. I'm from a town called Orleans. So you can just think of it as the old Orleans. Here in the US, you have New Orleans. This is the old Orleans. And for the better part of my life, until I was probably 20 or something like that, although I had traveled for, vacation and because my parents were kind enough to take me with them when they were traveling, I had pretty much lived there for my entire life. And then, when I was about 20, I got this amazing opportunity to go and actually, do my first internship during business school at a company in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And that was only 3 months, but those 3 months just basically blew my mind. And I was like, okay, so there is definitely, a lot that you learn when you basically go somewhere else and you are kind of fully immersed or immersed in a different environment. Mm-hmm. And it was the language, the culture, the climate, the money, everything was different. Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is fascinating, and I do want to kind of, I want to do that again. So a couple of years down the road, I had this opportunity to, instead of studying during the entire curriculum in my French business school, I have this opportunity to go to Canada and do a dual degree. And so that's basically how I ended up in Ottawa for a year. Mm-hmm. And so, that was kind of my second, I would say, deep experience as an expat in a way, if you think about it. And that was also very transformative for a number of reasons. And so I was there for a year, thinking about, what I would do after, I graduate, because that was my last year of studies. And it was very clear in my mind that I wanted to start my own company. This is what I wanted to do since I was a kid. I had no idea in what domain or industry or anything, but I just felt I had this kind of inner passion to build something and drive. And so it turns out that, when I was in Ottawa, I met with the guys at Shopify, because they were basically, and so they were less than 40 employees at the time. So you can imagine, it was just, they were already brilliant and amazing, and I was just very impressed with the guys that I met there. And so that kind of, was my first, I would say, close interaction with tech, because in the past I had done only internships in very large companies like L'Oreal or Lexmark or Schneider Electric. So very, very big corporation in traditional sectors, but I had never been in touch with the technology sector. And so I meet with the guys at Shopify. They blow my mind, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is new. This is exciting. But I have no clue, like how do you get started with that? And I come from France. So in France, we are more, I would say, we're a bit more conservative and a bit more, I would say, or a bit less eager to start new things. So coming from that background, I was like, okay, there is this shiny new thing that's called tech.
Yeah.
I understand I want to go there, but I have no clue what I want to do, and I have no network, and I have no prior experience, and I have no skills.
Yeah.
So let's start. That was basically this. And then I think I read maybe 20 or 30 books during that MBA year, just to kind of get the creative juice flowing. And I was like, okay. And I was trying to understand things. And then I read this book by this guy named Chris Gilbo, if I remember correctly. And he was basically, kind of saying, hey, you can learn a lot of things, on your own. And I was like, okay, yes, that's what I want to do. And so combining kind of everything I just mentioned, like this new interest in tech and the fact that, like being abroad was so inspirational, and the fact that I needed to kind of, find ideas for my next thing, I basically designed this kind of 1 year round the world trip that was kind of, custom made for me to basically just like learn new things. And so my goal was to spend 1 month in every city that I visited. So I was not really backpacking. I was more like, trying to go somewhere, usually a big city, and basically rent an apartment for a month, do my grocery shopping, and basically meet people and live like everyone in there. Yeah. And so that's basically what I did. Noémie came with me. So we traveled around the world for a year together. See, that was kind of the foundation of everything we did later.
Yeah. Were you guys already married at that point?
No, not yet.
Yeah. Kind of a pre-honeymoon though.
Yeah, kind of pre-honeymoon, but also like like it's a good test. I mean, if you can travel over over a year around the world with one person, chances are you can probably go through a lot. And so far, that's what life kind of has taught us so far. And so so then we traveled around the world for 1 year, and that basically ended up being the most transformational experience in our lives, and a lot has come out of it. But just to kind of sum it up, the idea was to take that opportunity to, one, travel around the world and see new things, new cultures. Two, interview interesting entrepreneurs who had done things in the tech sector so that we could kind of learn from their experience and maybe get some ideas into what we would do. And basically, three, actually take a step in the direction of what we would do next. And so I believe that we've been able to do all of these things.
Yeah, definitely. I think one question that's probably coming to mind for listeners is how do you afford it? How do you guys support yourself for this full year?
Well, we were very young, right? So we didn't need much. Many of the cities that we've been to were basically cheaper than the US or even France. So basically, so that's one thing. So we did have some money saved up front. My family helped me a lot, so that was great. And also we were kind of working while we were doing that. So it was not vacation. Noémie, she had some customers. She was doing some social media management consulting as a freelancer, and so she had some customers. So that was one thing. I was working with one of the biggest, I would say, media outlets in France called L'Express, and I was basically doing some interviews for them. And we ended up building our first business, which was the candy subscription e-commerce business that I mentioned earlier. That was cool. And we basically, I like to say that we bootstrapped it with minus $200 on our bank account, because basically we had literally no money, because again, we were bootstrapping already the trip, so we didn't have money to put up front in the business. And so I think that's one of the funniest thing about this trip. Yeah.
What was your favorite destination or city that you stayed in during your trip around the world?
Honestly, it's always a hard question when I'm asked this, because so to give the listeners like an idea, we spent a year around the world, and we traveled to Beijing, and then Seoul, then we went to Hong Kong, and then we also went to Bangkok and Tokyo and Melbourne and
Nice.
Sydney, and then we came to Los Angeles and San Francisco, New York, and then we wrapped up with Santiago del Chile in Chile, and then Buenos Aires, and then Sao Paulo. So all this to say that these are very interesting destinations, and each has its unique set of attributes. But we did love a lot the lifestyle that we had in Thailand. It was very cool. Bangkok was amazing. We met some amazing friends. Food was delicious. It was probably one of our favorite destinations during
Very
the
cool.
entire trip.
That's awesome. I need a notepad to track all this down. That's a long list for sure. But I didn't hear Kansas City on the list. You ever been to Kansas City?
I have not, but this is we've been in the States for 5 years now, close to
Yeah.
6 years. So we want to take more time to visit the country, because we were so heads down into work that we barely left California. So that's
Yeah. Yeah, I get
one
it.
of our goals for now.
Yeah. If you guys come out, let me know. We'll treat you to a good time.
Every time I hear the term Kansas City, or the word Kansas City, the name Kansas City, I think about the movie. I think it's called Lucky Number 11, and they
Yeah.
talk about the Kansas City Shuffle. And so
Yeah.
I think about that every single time. I'm sure the city is about much more than that, but that's how it's been printed in my mind.
Yeah. No, I think that's a popular movie line that comes to mind for folks. So you're not out of place with that.
Cool.
You talked about earlier, a couple of goals that you set out with as to reasons to take this trip. I guess, can you summarize, did the trip really accomplish that, and maybe what your biggest lesson learned or key takeaway was?
Yeah, the trip, has been amazing. I mean, on the personal, and emotional and cultural level, of course. I mean, you can probably imagine that being away from home for a year has been amazing, but also being exposed to so many different culture, that has been amazing. So yes, for sure, that goal was, achieved. As far as like, I would say, meeting amazing people, that also it has been pretty crazy. One of the person that I ended up meeting with was Seth Godin,
Oh yeah,
yeah, the famous author, and
yeah, famous marketer for listeners.
yeah, that has been a pretty crazy story, because again, like, he's a pretty high profile author, and just having a chance to meet with him for an hour in his office was pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Interviewing him for the French magazine L'Express was also very, very cool. So on that front, I would say the trip has been extremely inspirational. It has also allowed us to launch the first, our first business, so the candy
right.
subscription business, which we ended up selling 18 months later. So I mean, that was also a pretty good takeaway from the trip.
Yeah,
And last but not least, I would say that one of the things that we did not expect was the fact that we would end up actually publishing a book about what we had done.
wow,
And so that is kind of related to the fact that we met with Seth Godin, because
right.
basically when I got in touch with him, he recommended that that I get in touch with his French publisher to kind of coordinate the French interview. And so basically that's one thing led to another, and that's basically how we ended up landing a book deal to basically share our experience and what we had learned during this entire trip. So
Yeah, what's your
that
book
was
called?
kind of what's the book called?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, so it's in French,
okay,
but it's called Se lancer sans attendre, which basically means I would say uh, launching your career without waiting or something
Okay.
like that. It basically means, just don't think about it, just do it, and you'll see. And I think that, that's probably one of the main takeaways and the main thing that I would like to kind of emphasize here, which is that we kind of had an idea of what we were getting into with this project and this trip. We had our goals. We knew kind of, what we wanted to achieve. We also knew what, kind of what the risks were, maybe, spending a year without an actual, I would say, traditional job.
Yeah.
Maybe that would lead to nowhere. We didn't know. There were a lot of other risks. So we knew the upsides, we knew the risks. But there is one thing that we could not foresee, which is basically, what would come out of it and that we could actually not think about.
Right.
And so I think this is, not knowing where the hustle can lead you to.
Yeah.
I think that's, a big factor that you should take into account when you're about to start something, because there are things that you cannot imagine, and if you don't take a chance, well, you won't have a chance. So
Right.
I would say that, this is probably the biggest lesson, which is that you can never know what's going to come out of something once you start poking.
How do you think you and Naomi, how do you think your life would look different had you not gone on this trip?
That's a very, very good question. Probably, I don't know if we would still be in France, because
Yeah.
again, we were in Canada. Maybe we would have been somewhere else. But maybe we would not have started business that early, or we would have waited, or we would have chosen different paths. Maybe we would have a more traditional job. I really don't know. I can't
Yeah.
say. But for sure, it has had a tremendous impact on what we have done so far and where we are today.
For anyone listening out there who's thinking about taking a trip before they really dive more into the career, whether they're, coming out of college or university, or
Yeah.
maybe they're, mid-career and looking to pivot industries or pivot careers completely, what would you say to them as far as advice for, doing something like you've done?
Um, well, I think there are three main things, because I have thought about ever since. And so there are three things. The first, I think I already covered, is basically make sure that you solve the money question.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you have budgeted for the minimum that you will need, so that this is not going to kind of I would say damage your experience. So
Right.
I would say plan for it. Even if that means taking more time to save for it, or finding ways to have revenue streams, just make sure that you have the safety net that you need on the financial side.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be one. Number two, I would say, like, in one way or another, kind of be clear on what you get out of it and what you want to get out of it. Because for me and for Noémie, it was very clear. It was kind of I would say career oriented. We had these goals about things we wanted to learn, and people we wanted to meet, and these kind of things. But that may not be the same thing for everyone. Maybe for other people it's just making new friends. For yet other people it can be just backpacking to as many exotic places as you can. It doesn't really matter. What matters is what you want, and I think that clearly outlining it is very important, because you probably only have one shot at doing
Yeah.
this. So you want to make sure that you are aiming for the actual goals that matter to you. So that would be my number two. And my number three, which may seem obvious, or which may seem just obvious, is but it's not, is actually just enjoy. Because this is this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and you should enjoy it, because there will be times where you will be like, oh yeah, I don't understand how these work, or maybe you will get hurt, or you will need to go to the hospital or whatever. But it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you just see it as an experience, and enjoy, and stay open. And I think this may be harder than we can imagine, but once it's over, it's over. So I would say yes.
Yeah.
Enjoy as much.
A couple key questions I always ask every guest are: one, what books or resources have made an impact on your life? And then two, just how can people get a hold of you?
One, like I said, when I was in my MBA, I read like 20 or 30 books. I've read a lot also while we were around the world. But ironically, I think like that the book that has had the most impact on me, and I have yet to find another book that influences me more than that, is actually that book with that cheesy title, which is by Dale Carnegie, and it's basically how to win friends and influence people. Because beyond that title, which by the way I find very clever from a marketing standpoint.
Right.
Beyond that cheesy title, I mean, the main the main theme of the entire book is it's empathy. It's basically how you can put yourself in the shoes of someone else to basically understand what drives them, and to basically work with them or just get on better with them, and that's true in your personal and professional life. And I have found that so far this has never let me down. And it's not about manipulation or anything. It's just about genuinely caring and listening for the people, because when you put yourself in their shoes, then you have you just have a better shot at making everyone happy. And just to kind of to illustrate what I mean, it's not only true on the personal side with my wife, but like, for instance, one thing we do every single day with our customers at Loomly is that we speak with them and we listen to their feedback, and everything they say is carefully saved into our roadmap, and this is what decides what we're going to work on next. So putting ourselves in the shoes of our customers is what has led us to where we are today, and to the success that we are happy to have known so far. So hands down, this is the most important book I've ever read, and I would recommend to anyone.
Great recommendation. Thanks.
Last
question. How can people get a hold of you if they want advice for traveling around the world or creating?
You can hit me up on Twitter, at Thibaud Clement. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. It's my email address is pretty easy to find. It's just thibaud@loomly.com. So I'm pretty easy to join.
And we'll link to all those in the show notes too for anyone listening or watching out there. But Thibaud, really appreciate your time. You got an awesome story, and I wish you nothing but the best with continuing to grow Loomly.
Thank you so much, Eric, for having me. It was a great pleasure to speak with you and share that story that dates a little. So it's pretty cool to revive it and think about it.
That wraps up today's episode. We hope to have brought you some valuable key takeaways. Most importantly, whatever you learned, take action on it. Apply it to your life. Apply it to your career. Motivation and inspiration only come as a result of taking that first step. So if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe on whichever platform you found the show. You can also follow us on all the major social media platforms, or contact us directly at genwhyleaders@gmail.com. That's GENWHY leaders@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Eric Huey, and thanks for listening to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast.